Hello, good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you who are a part of the Leader Storytelling Lounge today. We firmly believe in the fact that if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. You don't have to be born with specific characteristics or traits of a leader. You don't have to wait for a tap on the shoulder. You don't have to be at the top of your organization. Instead, you can discover your potential right now. All of us have that spark of leadership in us, whether it is in business, in government, or as a non-profit volunteer. And it is very vital for us to bring the leaders of yesteryears and today to be in touch with the leaders of tomorrow. In my work of about 25 years on leadership development and analyzing how leaders are made, there is no universal trait, skill, or style that has led leaders to their success journeys. Rather, leadership emerged from the stories that the leaders hold dear to their hearts, consciously and subconsciously. These leaders were testing themselves through real world experiences and reframing their life stories to understand who they are at their core. One very such fine leader is with us today, Dr. Florida Starks. Dr. Florida Starks, the Chief Diversity Officer at Pearson, has been a colleague, a friend, and a mentor for the last 8 years. Her passion lies in creating impactful organization performance solutions focused on building diverse and inclusive communities. She's a human resource expert with a track record of developing top talent. And her background includes managing multi level teams, strategy development, budget planning, gap analysis, and collaborating to achieve success. She has an extensive background in executive coaching, diversity and inclusion, learning, and development. With that being a brief background, it is my proud privilege to welcome Dr. Florida with us today for us to be able to learn from her experiences. Welcome, Dr. Florida. We are so proud and privileged to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rupinder. I'm so happy to be here and have such great conversation with you and all of the attendees and get to know each other a little better and share my journey along the way.
Thank you so much. So without any further ado, Dr. Florida, why don't you take us through your journey and maybe mentioning your highs and lows as you had to dig deep into your reserves of leadership?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll start with, as you mentioned, I work for Pearson. And so Pearson, as many of you may or may not know, is an organization that is 20,000 employees strong. And we focus on ensuring that employees are able to, and our community is able to, and people around the world are able to accomplish their visions and dreams through learning. And so that's really been part of my journey. So it's absolutely fantastic that this is the space that I sit in today, primarily because as we think about what learning does for the individual and the ability to be a leader, it comes through a number of opportunities that are unique and sometimes under rocks that we never turn over, that someone helps us, helps guide us to those spaces and find ways that we can be our next better selves. And so for me, when I think about my own personal career journey, I started in the workforce, over 30 years ago as a teenager. And all I wanted to be able to do at that time was to, make a lot of money, like so many other people start out. But I quickly learned in that first job that although it was a sales job and it was very highly recognizable position, that I had an ability to make an influence on people and how it is they leverage their funds to protect products that they had in their home. And from that, I got an opportunity to do some training. And so I spent a lot of my career in a learning and development function. And I'll talk about a very low point. And on that journey, I wanted to become a leader of an organization. I was very young, but I thought, I know a lot. I've had quite a bit of experience, and I'd like to use that experience to work in a leadership function. And so I was just looking at that leadership title, and I had applied for a position, didn't get it. Went and had a conversation with my mentor and said, these are the things I bring to the table, help me develop myself so that I can, get this job when it's posted again. And, David Brown is his name. And he said, well, okay, let's talk about some areas that you can continue to focus on developing. That's turning over those rocks. And so I figured I'd develop myself. The job was posted again, interviewed for it, thought I'd knock the interview out the park, didn't get the job. I went back to him and I said, well, I'm not getting these jobs. Tell me what's going on. And he said, well, first and foremost, you're going after a title. And that's really not the way you make a difference. He said, secondly, you need to be humble. And though for, me holistically, that was a very low point in my life, because I thought, here I am, I have all of these great skills and capabilities. I've worked in sales, I've done learning and development for some time, and this is the perfect job, yet I can't get it. And those two pieces of advice have stayed with me. And it really, took me from earlier where I talked about I wanted to have a job where I made a lot of money, to having a job because it was a title, to then recognizing that the true power of my ability to influence others was not in a title, but it is in making an impact in that role. And so fortunately, the job was posted again. I applied for the job. Do you think I got it, Dr. Rupinder?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I didn't get the job. I did not get that job. But what I learned from that moment, even though, when you're in that valley, you sometimes think, I'm just not going to be able to climb out of this. I'm not going to be able to rebound. Fortunately, I stayed in the role that I had at the time, and that took me on a different path. And so I'm fortunate to have experienced that point in my life, which was seemingly a low, but gave me really the breeding ground for additional development, awareness, tenacity, dealing with no, because we all get told no at some point in our life, and understanding that this moment was not only for me, it was also for the benefit of other people, like everyone here today, like yourself, me and you having this conversation, and so many others that are part of this dialogue. And then I would say the high of my career really is reflective of where I am now. And I say that because on my vision board 3 years ago, I posted just the words Chief Diversity Officer, and I've listed all of these images that spoke to the influence that I would be able to have and people that I would be able to touch. And then I put the globe around it to represent, how does this type of work reflect in the world around us? And so fortunately, here I am working for a global organization that has presence in over 200 countries. And all we want to do is, continue to be the world's largest learning company and to help everyone achieve their potential through learning. And I'm able to do that because I connect to so many employees, our leadership group, our board. All of those people are important, but most important is connecting with the people of Pearson and knowing that that has a great output and impact even on the people who take a look at our learning products, who use our digital content, who have such influence and input on how it is we continue to evolve. And that makes me quite happy.
This is beautiful to hear, Dr. Florida. You got the two most important lessons of being a leader. Leadership is a privilege. It's a responsibility as well. And it's not only about a title, right? Which most of us end up thinking right at the beginning of a career. So what a profound lesson. And thank you for sharing that. Not only that, humility, such a cornerstone for enabling other leaders as well as going forward with that spark in you. So thank you for sharing that and your stories around it. I'm sure it will keep continuing inspiring millions of people going forward. And also the fact that you could blend, your passion for learning with your passion for inclusive leadership. So I'm sure the world of, learning per se and at large will benefit a lot from your experiences. And one thing that I have been closely following, Dr. Florida, and that's something which is very real and has taken precedence over the last year or two that we've been going through this pandemic is the effect of pandemic on the workforce, and especially women workforce. If you look at the statistics and a report which came out of on the effect of pandemic on women workforce, especially the Black women workforce. Unfortunately, it's not very encouraging. And that report by McKinsey and Lenin says that in fact almost 1 in 4 women are being forced to leave the workforce because they have to work for extended hours, the extended childcare, prerogative lies with the woman, and of course there have been layoffs. So one is that part, that stark reality, that immediate effect of pandemic. But then there is the larger, landscape of racial discrimination, gender inequity. How do you deal with all of this, as a woman of color, as a woman who's leading the diversity and inclusiveness agenda of Pearson? And do you at your what are the challenges that you face maybe, and if you could throw some light on how did you really overcome them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And first and foremost, I take a look at three very specific categories as it relates to current inequalities that we see in women, and then especially within women of color. And so holistically, we know, and this is global, holistically, we know that women are paid less than men. Women get less development oftentimes than men, and women have less opportunity for support through advocacy and sponsorship than men. And so in my role, my responsibility is to really take advantage of those three areas by ensuring that we do the opposite of what we see history has done in terms of not paying attention in those areas. So I'm very focused on ensuring that first and foremost, as we take a look at pay, and in many countries around the world, and specifically in the UK, there is a requirement for pay reporting that keeps organizations honest in terms of what it is they're paying women versus what it is they're paying men. And although it's reported in the UK, the focus for me is to make sure that internally, though it's not a governmental or legislative requirement, that we're thinking about that at Pearson. So as we take a look at our organization, we have very specific and intentional planning on a quarterly basis around how it is we identify compensation and compensation gaps, and help leaders take a look at steps that they can engage in to help remedy that. The second thing, though, is around ensuring that hiring practices, because that impacts pay, is done in a way that is void of bias and those inherent behaviors that sometimes lead to those pay inequities. And so for me and the organization, what we focus on is taking a look at all of our roles and ensuring that, we have very upfront dialogue about the intention of that role, the capabilities required for that role, because we know that, again, women will take a look at a job description and wait until they tick at least 9 of the 10 boxes. Someone who identifies as a male will look at the job description and say, well, I got 5 of these things, so let's go for it. So that inevitably, just based by the way the organization shakes out in terms of its careers, the career levels sometimes will reflect some inequity. We work to close those gaps by ensuring that we have very sound hiring practices and ensuring that we are intentional in that second area about developing women. So we have very specific programs that are led through our organization, and then also many of our business support groups throughout the organization that offer additional development and enrichment through the form of professional programs and certifications, but also through peer mentoring and leadership mentoring programs. That's very important to ensure that people, especially those who identify as women, have opportunities where they can see themselves grow and they're getting advice from other women, and by that case, men who are allies and very supportive of development and movement into other areas of the business based on individual desires in their own career trajectories, that vision of their career trajectory. And then another piece is sponsorship. We've got to talk about each other more. So I, am a woman, and my job, I think, as a woman is to make sure that I'm talking about other women. And so often we see in organizations, I'll just speak to professional organizations. So often we see some women achieve a great degree of success and they never mention anyone else. And already in this role that I've only been in 8 weeks, I'm thinking about who's next, right? What are ways that I can build this succession pipeline of individuals, so that when my accountability here is done, when my task here is accomplished, and I'm able to move into whatever's next for me, once I've achieved that level, then there are other people who are willing to and prepared for stepping into the role. And that's what sponsorship is about, creating those opportunities and ensuring that those who identify as women specifically are able to take advantage of those opportunities. That's just one example, but I think there's so many others that we can, demonstrate in terms of our own professional connections. There are a lot of opportunities for networking. And when we're in those moments of networking, I have a brain trust of people that I meet with monthly. And often those individuals who are also diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals will say, well, I have a job. And then I have the opportunity then to sponsor someone, primarily, women that I know, to say, hey, I know this person and they're at XYZ company. You might want to check them out. So we have that great responsibility to help close those equity gaps and ensure that we're having conversation with one another, checking in with one another, because the pandemic has certainly worsened the reflection of women that we see in the workplace. They're departing at a rate that is unlike any other time in history. In the US alone, there have been since last year over 3 million women who have departed the workforce. That number will continue to be progressively disparate around the world if we don't, as organizations, start to think proactively about how do we give additional flexibilities in our benefits and the work schedule and so many other areas where we can make an impact, and not make people believe that they have to choose between their family life and building a professional life as well.
Yeah. And I completely echo with when you say, we need to build more sponsorship for women, as much as there are number of seats, certain numbers that need to be met, and trying to build in people at the entry level. Till the time we are not actively committing ourselves, especially women at the senior leadership positions, to make sure that they hold a hand, they throw the ball for someone else, who can take up that role and responsibility. And as you rightly mentioned, create succession pipelines for your role to be taken over. This journey will not, really move forward. So active sponsorship at the top is definitely the need of the hour, as well as providing flexibility. One of the reasons in my research around women leadership that has come very strongly is the presence of a second generation bias. We know bias is there in the system, and that's generations, years, hundreds of years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of those biases, while are very explicit and can be measured, for example, gender parity, pay parity, numbers, and all of that, a lot of others are so embedded in the organizational systems. I think as simple as consideration of active traveling when being considered for the next level of promotion.
Mm-hmm.
And variety of reasons do not allow women to travel as much as their male counterparts can travel. And which is why sometimes I think trying and embedding some new policies and removing some of the old policies which may favor men in a certain way is also something that can be looked at. And people at you at the lead, are actually in position and in that role who can be the torch bearers of that change. And I absolutely love the idea of when you say so. Next and what next and what next, so it's like really looking for the future which doesn't really exist yet. So brilliant vision there, Dr. Florida. And one of the qualities that a leader should have for sure is to have a very clear vision of where do they want to take their followers, right, or the group or the organizations. And largely because the world is now going to be comprised of millennials, we are already saying by 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. And millennials being the digital natives and the vocal proponents of how they see leadership, they are demanding, why should we be led by you, and not only saying, but actually asking leaders clear description of their leadership philosophy. So, with regards to that, what is your answer to this question? Why should anyone be led by you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It certainly causes one to think very deeply and inwardly. in terms of the level of influence that they want to have and the span of impact that they want to make. And for me, the answer to that would be, because what I am able to accomplish, I'm only able to accomplish by others. And so that means that I'm very much so driven by collaboration. I'm driven by curiosity. I'm driven by people who have a great sense of how it is they will contribute to the vision and what it means for us to collectively move forward and leave an indelible mark, not only for what's applicable today, but models of leadership and ways of working and ways that people engage and ways that we show up inclusively for decades upon decades upon decades to come. And so in that, my leadership is very much so grounded in a historical context for me being a Black woman and knowing everything that my ancestors had experienced, being able to accomplish, what it is likely is their wildest dream, but knowing that what's next for not only people of my own heritage, but people of so many other heritages that first and foremost have gone unheard, unseen, unrecognized, have a great opportunity to raise that level of awareness through, the people that I connect to and the people that I lead. And interestingly, I'm happy to hear about their story so that we can take a look at not only what separates us through differences and celebrate and recognize and acknowledge those differences, but how do we take a look at all of the rich past that we have and identify then what's next for the next generations and many more generations to come to build legacy. And so for me, that's what leadership is about, understanding that there's a very specific professional goal that we have ahead that we must achieve, but we must not be able to achieve that if we don't know each other well. And so I like to ensure that, we have that great collaborative view so that we understand each other well. And because of it, we're able to develop a better future.
Wow. And increasingly, in the fragmented world that we are living in, where there's such a bit amount of volatility that predictability has actually gone for a toss. If people do not come across at all levels with a collaborative spirit, there is only so much that you can do.
Mhm.
And so that's paramount, that's imperative, and that's fundamental. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Florida, which brings me to, and which helps me narrow down to the more operational needs of the scenario here. We did talk about a fragmented world technologically, astute world, and the need to, develop on the go. In the kind of world that we are living in, and coming from a human resource background and from a learning background, and now building on inclusive leadership, what are those skills and attributes do you think which are so essential for people leaders or people who are leading the talent function?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I was reading some information from Gartner the other day. And one of the things that they talk about, and I wholly believe this, is that first and foremost, leaders have to be able to build trust. The organization can never move forward without doing so. But outside of that, one of the things that HR professionals really focus on is in terms of workplace of the future and workplace skills and upskilling. That's an important and evolving need because the workplace looks so differently. And when we think about, different industrial revolutions, and now we're in this digital revolution period, and who knows what digital revolution, or evolution is going to look like next. One of the things that's important is to determine capabilities. So the way that we assess people today is going to look very different in the way that we assess people for tomorrow. And so having that ability to have that dynamic skill mapping is going to be really critical for HR professionals and leaders just in general to understand if someone came from a specific industry and now they're looking to reshape who they are or re-engineer their career, what are those crossover or overlapping competencies and capabilities that they bring to a role that would be very applicable for what's next? And then importantly, how do you continue to contribute to that individual's growth within the organization by ensuring that you're providing those development tools that will get them upskilled to the place where you need them to be able to operate successfully? I think that also, when we think about what's important next for human resources is to continue to build on the strength of its leadership organization. Because in the successful model, a lot of what we see in terms of success comes from not only the culture of the individuals and the people who make up that culture, and that represents not only those primary and secondary dimensions of diversity, but those tertiary dimensions of diversity, that unseen thing around professional experiences and, places people lived, the cultural context, cultures within culture. That's a very important piece. So when we think about, that through the lens of that leadership piece, and it's going to be very much so important to ensure that, people understand that some of the things that will be absolutely imperative moving forward is a deeper level of emotional intelligence and self-awareness. The organization has to be able to weave messaging in terms of how it wants to show up and its core values and its vision throughout all of its applications. But I think that ultimately it's very important that HR organizations, which is a business imperative, understands fully how to seek those missing perspectives and fill gaps where they exist. And so when we think about why that's important, well, a lot of that is it lends towards a bit of ambiguity. But I think that the workforce of the future is going to be able to not only anticipate that ambiguity, identify what it could potentially means, but for HR professionals specifically, whether we're talking about talent acquisition, talent development, diversity, equity, and inclusion, all employee learning, you have to understand in filling that what's next, especially for a workforce that's going to be primarily comprised of millennials and even Gen Alpha. Gen Z. I don't want to skip over Gen Z. I have two children. One is a millennial, one is a Gen Zer. But Gen Alpha is, next in the workforce. How do you prepare for developing each of those different and distinct generations for the future and ensure that leadership principles are embedded not only for those who have people line manager responsibility, but also those who are going to be the next line managers and contribute to the organization's evolvement.
Wow, that's a very succinct yet elaborate description of how do we need to prepare our leaders for something which really doesn't exist till now, and you may not even have a visibility of what is coming next. But sticking to the core principles of compassion, of collaboration, and also of continuous learning, as you rightly mentioned at the beginning, curiosity and collaboration is what makes you who you are. And if those principles are embedded in the talent leaders also, it's definitely going to prepare organizations at a much more wider scale. So I am, leaving with a lot from you here. But before we go, Dr. Florida, let me just quickly try and sum up for our listeners. What is it that we've got golden nuggets from your story and from your life? Clearly, authenticity is the cornerstone of your leadership, and it just so shows very well in the way you talk, you carry, you embody, and you display your value systems to embed with the organizational values. Clearly, a demonstration of passion for purpose, leading with humility and practicing values and ensuring that your values are showing in your behaviors is so critical for organizational success. Establishing meaningful relationships is, again, one huge pillar of getting the work done. At the end of the day, it's about people. And if you do not understand your people, you really don't understand businesses, right? And finally, cupping it up with the self-discipline to ensure that you get the results that the organization desires from your role and your position as a leader. What brilliant nuggets in quick 30 minutes. Thank you, Dr. Florida, for that. We're going to leave you with one last quick rapid fire round so that we have a little bit of fun on the go as we have this very important conversation. So I'm going to shoot some quick questions to you. So you don't have to think. The rule is you just have to say the first thing that comes to the top of your mind. You ready?
Ready.
Super. So here you go. The first one. How would you describe Florida in one word?
Peculiar.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Okay. Who is your role model, Dr. Florida?
My grandmother. I lovingly called her G-Mom.
Oh, that's lovely. Which book are you reading currently?
The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. It's an awesome story, and I won't give it away. And I know this is rapid fire, but check it out if you're interested.
Super. I'm sure I'm going to check out for sure. And let's hope our readers do too. So tell us one passion of yours which is outside of work.
Music. It connects everybody.
And
you don't even have to, you can listen to music in so many different languages, and you don't even have to know what they're saying, but you can feel the warmth of it, the happiness of it, the closeness that it brings you to so many other people. It's such a great connector.
So true. It does break barriers in all the possible sense.
Hmm.
Okay, if you could go back in time, what would you change about your life?
Nothing. I wouldn't change a thing. I feel like if I change something, it might not take me on the journey that I've experienced, and I've had quite the journey.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you are a sum of how what you've experienced, right?
Hmm.
So, very well said. Thank you. And if your life was a song, since you like music, what would it be?
Masterpiece, Jasmine Sullivan. Check out the
Oh,
words.
lovely. I should have expected that. That's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, here goes the last one for you, Dr. Florida, which is what legacy would you want to leave in one word?
Love.
Oh,
Love is just simple. If we love more, we lead better. If we love more, we care more about the people in our circle. If we love more, we care about the people we don't even know, and that extends to volunteerism. So love just really is it's a healer, and it is the one thing that everybody needs more of.
and I can second that you live that principle, value, fundamental trait, whatever you said, because I've been a recipient of that love many, many years back. So thank you for doing that,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Florida, and thank you for being with us. There are a couple of questions. I'm going to shoot them to you later, and maybe you can
Okay.
respond them at your own sweet time. I know you're hard pressed for time, but thank you so much for doing that for us today. And making this world a really better place with your insights and your wisdom and your experiences.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I've loved this conversation, getting to have this time with you early in the morning for me. I know it's evening for you and everyone else likely on the call, but I absolutely appreciate the time and hope that we can connect again soon.
Absolutely. It's been great talking to you, and thank you for taking out the time for us right first thing in the morning, despite having such a busy schedule. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care and have a great weekend ahead.
Same to you and everyone. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Take care. Bye.
Bye, Dr. Rupinder.